this weekend is the opening weekend for the latest Daily Wire documentary titled Am I Racist, starring Matt Walsh. And this one is kind of a departure from other movies and documentaries produced by the conservative media outlet, because all the other ones that they've released up to this point have basically just been behind the paywall on their own website. But this movie right here is actually getting a wide theatrical release. And it's something that I've criticized the Daily Wire about in the past, because they say they want to influence culture and try to help build up on the American culture, but yet all their movies are hidden behind a paywall on their own website. So I've said if they actually want to do that, then they need to put it in front of as many eyes as possible. And that usually includes actually releasing them theatrically, as opposed to just giving it to people who are already subscribed to him. So I think this is a good move on their part. But there are many out there who are upset about the fact that this movie is being released theatrically, or the fact that Daily Wire is actually making something like this. I'll get more on that in a little bit, but first let's look at this article from Variety talking about the movie Am I Racist? Matt Walsh's Satire, Am I Racist? Hits 1,500 plus theaters as Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire bets big for movie dominance. I don't know if they're necessarily looking to dominate the box office with this movie. I'm thinking they're just hoping that it'll make a splash, if anything. Every now and then, a low-budget film emerges from outside the studio system and catches fire with the largely ignored right-leaning demographic, leaving mouths agape in Hollywood's executive suites. The Daily Wire hopes to add to the list of films that include The Passion of the Christ, I Can Only Imagine, and last year's Sound of Freedom with the Satire, Am I Racist? I don't think they're, like I said, expecting to be as big as some of those other movies, and I kind of reject the idea that this is a satire. I mean, it's more of a documentary, at least from the impression I got from it. I haven't seen it at this time. Maybe it's supposed to be comedic at the same time, but still, you can have a documentary that has a comedic tone to it. It doesn't necessarily have to be serious. So just because it's funny doesn't necessarily make it a satire, even if you're kind of mocking something, which is what they're doing with this movie. Starring comedian Matt Walsh, the Borat-style mockumentary takes aim at the DEI movement, and it's set to open in 1,510 theaters today, representing the most ambitious swing for the 9-year-old company founded by Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring. Apparently, Matt Walsh is a comedian, and this is a mockumentary much like Borat, but I kind of reject that. I think that's just with the intention of trying to downplay what this movie actually is, because the reason Borat's a mockumentary is because that was largely scripted, and many of the interactions that he had in there were staged. Yeah, there was some that weren't staged where the people weren't participants in it, but there was many of them where the people were participants and were basically reading from a script, and that's why it's a mockumentary. Meanwhile, this one, it's just Matt Walsh interviewing people. Yes, he's doing it kind of deceptively under the guise that he's on their side, but at the same time, it is still just him interviewing people, and all the interactions are genuine one. That's why it's not necessarily a mockumentary, but you know, it is what it is. But still, whether this movie is successful or not, I think the bar for it to be successful for the Daily Wire is pretty low, because scrolling further down in the article, it says the last documentary by Matt Walsh, which only released on the Daily Wire's own platform, had a budget of less than $1 million. And it says they made more than 30 times that on the back end. That's through new Daily Wire subscriptions and through ad sales on there. This one, they're spending a little bit more on it. They say it's about $3 million to make this one. And they're saying the print and advertising spend is comparable to Neon or A24 movies, which is around 50% of the production budget. I don't know if that means this is $3 million with the product or with that added onto it, but let's just assume it's not. So that means this movie needs to make $4.5-5 million at a minimum in order for Daily Wire to make money off of it. And I think that's more than a possibility given the previous documentary that they had. But still, even if it doesn't necessarily make its budget back at the box office, they could just put it on their own platform and still make a lot of money that way, or just rent it out on video on demand and make their money back. So I think they're going to reach profitability with this movie, but there are many out there who are upset about it. Namely, many of the people who are participating in this one. We have this article from the New York Post. White fragility author slams conservative podcaster Matt Walsh, who duped her into giving black producer reparations, a new documentary. And yeah, there's a clip of that going around that I thought was pretty funny. For those who don't know, Robin DiAngelo is someone who makes a lot of money giving talks and interviews about how to be anti-racist and other things like that, which is kind of the stuff that Matt Walsh is claiming to do within this documentary. That's why he's going under disguise and doing interviews with people like Robin DiAngelo. And during his interaction with her, he, at the end of it, he convinced her to give the black producers some cash in the form of reparations, which I thought was kind of a funny touch to include. But one of the biggest questions about this is kind of also serving the point of the documentary, is that Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire believe people like this are basically race hustlers, and that they're trying to perpetuate racial animosity, because if there was racial harmony between different groups, then people like this would cease to exist. Their jobs would be no longer needed. So it's in their best interest to actually try to, make people kind of divide up the races, because then they get paid a lot of money to actually give these talks and interviews and stuff. And for this movie, it says here she was paid $15,000 that she later donated, well, according to her, to participate. But when she showed up for the interview, a few things felt off, including the ill-fitting wig Walsh had on as a man bun. But she said Walsh seemed earnest about anti-racist work, and his questions were not adversarial until things got weird at the end, in which she delved into the cringeworthy reparations scene that left DiAngelo visibly bewildered. I was so unsettled by the way Matt manipulated the last scene that I emailed the contact person, who went by the name Lee Hampton, to explain that this scene was not an example of reparations and could mislead viewers, DiAngelo explained. She did say she asked them not to use that portion in the movie, though, but never really heard back from them. But despite all this and saying that it felt off when she got there, she noticed Matt Walsh wearing a wig. At the same time, she still agreed to do the interview and still had the sit-down conversation, because she was getting paid $15,000 for basically just sitting down and having a conversation with them for a couple hours, and that's it. And this kind of just proves the point of the documentary, is that people like her don't actually care. They just are in it for the money. But this isn't the only reason people are upset with this and what they're actually doing in response to this movie being released. Matt was sharing this on Twitter of some screen grabs from various Reddit posts with the thread, movie theater employees. I'll be making the transactions as difficult as possible for anyone seeing the Matt Walsh movie. This other one, can you take the good seats out of service without anyone noticing? Only sell the creatures that crawl out of the mud to see this thing, the craft seats. This is Reddit. I don't think they have any place to stand when they're saying other people are just creatures. I'm convinced this is probably just a bot account anyway, but whatever it is, what it is. This one just makes me feel gross having it playing. I can handle God's Not Dead or whatever other Christian movies we have, but this one just feels wrong to have. It's going to be a long couple of days. It's just a movie playing in the theater. You don't have to watch the movie, but this just kind of goes back to the idea that not only do they not want to see it personally, they don't want other people to see it. We're getting it. We had one manager joke that if we did, he would quit. He might just if he deals with any of their ish. I don't know. I couldn't imagine being this fragile where you couldn't even stand the idea that there's a movie being played and people are watching it that don't agree with you. It's like, if you don't watch it, fine. It's not going to hurt you. You don't have to like it. Just let other people watch it if they want to. He also shared this. Some of the comments are pretty amazing. These people are really believe that conservatives don't have a moral right to make movies. Film is an art form that belongs to them. That's truly how they see it. And it's in response to this post right here. And I think it's less that they believe that conservatives don't have a right to make any art like this, but they just don't have a right to exist. That's what the whole cancel culture thing is about. It's basically making sure people can't live in polite society if they don't personally agree with them. And that's where you get genocides happening. And I know that's kind of jumping the gun a little bit, saying like, this means this person wants to genocide conservatives. No, that's not the case, but that's kind of the mindset, in that the other side is so wrong that they shouldn't exist in the world. And if you can't convince them or re-educate them or whatever to your ways, and you have to exterminate them in some way, shape, or form. And that's kind of, I'm not saying they're pushing for that right here. It's just, like I said, the mindset that goes into such a belief system. Then there was this thing right here, this statement put out by a theater owner. I'm not going to read the whole thing here. You can see it. It was shared by Libs of TikTok, where they're essentially saying they're being threatened to remove the movie from their theater by violent left-wing activists. And just kind of as a comparison, there's that Donald Trump movie that's supposed to come out, which the whole point of it is to try to smear him. In fact, I know there was even stuff in there that was verifiably didn't happen, but they're including it in the movie because it makes him look bad, or it's supposed to make him look bad. And just imagine if a bunch of conservatives started threatening a theater to get them to pull it. That would be front page news all over the place. But nope, left-wing activists can threaten to have this documentary moved from theaters, and you only hear about it being shared on social media, and that's about it. And it just goes to show that the media doesn't like this movie. That's kind of why we're seeing this when it comes to the reviews. No reviews from critics, 99% for audiences. That's bound to go down. These are just the early people who wanted to see it. As more people see it, it's probably going to go down, but still, that's a good score for it. But I think this is just kind of like the telling part where critics don't even want to bother watching it, and just kind of reminds me of cult-like behavior where cults and their members aren't even supposed to address any outsiders. They're not supposed to listen to what they say. They're just supposed to avoid them at all costs, because if they can listen to someone else talk, then it might break through the indoctrination that they've experienced. So they just try to avoid it and act like it doesn't exist. And I think that's where a lot of critics can't even bother to watch this movie to give it a bad score, because they don't want to hear the other side, because it might actually convince them. I don't think they know consciously that's what's happening, but that's really what's happening. That's why a lot of these people don't like that the movie is being played at all, because they don't like the idea that maybe they might hear something through osmosis and then be convinced that their whole worldview is wrong. So they try to avoid it at all costs. But ultimately, this is going to be something that comes out. Whether it'll make a splash in the culture remains to be seen. I think this is going to spark some debates and kind of become another one of those things like the whole "what is a woman" thing that basically become a major talking point, or just kind of a big question that really just breaks the brain of a lot of people on the left when you ask them that, because they don't know how to answer it. And I think, I don't know if "am I racist" is going to be that next big thing, but I think it is going to spark some conversations. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.